The most widely published book in human history reveals that we are created in the image of God. Throughout our human journey, each encounter is an opportunity to see the shared humanity in ourselves and others. Regardless of one's views on religion, each experience and each story weaves us together towards a common path. A path of transformation, a process of growth and understanding, a recognition that, at our core, we share a common destiny. What does the search for truth really mean in our lives? How can we find a sense of unity in a world so diverse and divided? As we reflect on these questions, we start to uncover a fundamental connection that binds us all beyond our differences. Welcome to Created in the Image of God, Building Vibrant Communities, with our host, Wade Franson. Tonight's episode is Connecting with Divine Love.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Created in the Image of God. As you know, we're rebranding ourselves this year with that Building Vibrant Communities tagline. And I can think of no better guest than to help us further advance that than tonight's guest. I've been so looking forward to having Diane Haworth on the show. She has initiated the Be Love principles in her life and promotes these through her work. Let's welcome her into the studio today. Hi there, Diane.
Hi, Wade, and hello to everyone who's with us live and anyone who's ever going to see this. I am so excited to be here today. Thank you.
And thank you for taking the time. I know we talked a little bit beforehand. The show is a little bit later than, I think you're on the East Coast, right?
Yep.
So, and it's a cold one there, but cold here, but we're going to warm this right up with your story. So as our audience knows, we always try to get to know the real you, who you are at your core, by diving into your origin story, your creation story. So tell us a little bit about who your parents were, where you were born, and the situation into which you learned about this world.
So I love that. Thank you. One of the things that I like to tell people is I'm just pretty regular person. Was born in a tiny little town in Virginia, about 50 miles southwest of Washington, D.C. And if you remember the old Andy Griffith shows, and if you remember Mayberry, that was about the kind of community I grew up with. Everyone knew each other's name. When I was a little girl growing up in the 60s, we still had a party line on a house phone. And I'm really dating myself now. And it was
there are a lot of people who don't even know, can't even relate to what you're talking about, but I'm old enough to know what you're talking about.
Well, it was a really interesting little place to grow up because it was the epitome of small Southern town. But we were a stone's throw from Washington, D.C. So it really, especially back in those days when there were no cell phones, no paparazzi, it would not be a big deal to see senators or Supreme Court justices in the Safeway. As a matter of fact, the Kennedys had a weekend place. Jacqueline Kennedy was an equestrian superstar, actually, and part of this is an equestrian community. They were in the county where I grew up on the weekend. So it was just really interesting of this, the way that I grew up. My parents both actually had been in World War II. My mom for a short time, but she had lost her brother to World War II. Her mother had died at a very, very early age. So she had a lot of trauma growing up. And back in those days, you just lived with it. My dad had been a little 18, 19-year-old farm boy from Nebraska, who I don't think really had been outside of the county when he found himself on a troop ship headed to Europe. Now, my dad, who was a decorated war hero, actually, was captured, spent some time in a German POW camp. He also was one of the young, it's hard to even talk about. He was one of the young privates that helped to liberate Auschwitz. And he lived with those horrors his entire life till the day he died. So they were both really doing the best they could in a very tumultuous world, right? At the time, trying to do their own healing and raise us. Now, as a result, I really think that I just felt disconnected from love. Now, I know my parents loved me and all of that, but I had a hard time feeling safe. When I was a young girl was when the Vietnam War started. And that was the first time we started seeing images of war on TV every night. And at that time, in the early years, they weren't edited. So I was seeing horrific images as a young kid. So the world felt very unsafe to me.
Well,
Lived through,
do you think that some of those early experiences, in that your parents were both involved in the war, and I forget what the exact relationship was, the person who actually was at Auschwitz during the
my dad,
liberation? Your
my
dad,
dad,
wow. So I lived in Germany for 10 years. I never made it to Auschwitz exactly, but I had to go to Dachau multiple times
yeah.
with tour guides and this kind of thing. And um so yeah, those experiences, I wonder if they maybe somehow shaped that feeling that the world wasn't a safe place and that there was a lack of love if these wars could happen. Do you think that maybe was influencing your sort of pre-conscious thought self? Because as kids, we don't reflect and understand where these thoughts and feelings are coming from. We just like a sponge, take them in, take them on.
Well, it had to, right? It had to. And like a lot of people in my generation, all of our grandparents, our parents, our aunts and uncles were involved in some way in the war effort. And plus, remember, I'm a stone's throw from Washington, D.C. So there's all the government workers and the Pentagon folks. And so there's just a lot of awareness, even at a young age, of that. And I think my parents really, who did absolutely the very best they could, were doing their best to heal themselves from their own,
Right.
yeah, from their own traumas.
There was no discussion of
No,
post-traumatic stress disorder during World
no,
War II. Uh,
no,
Um,
no,
and
there was no
there's
discussion.
there's good and bad in that. I almost smiled to myself when you first mentioned, back in the day, we didn't think twice about those things, right? Part of that is really good, right? Because I think today we've gone into the other ditch, right? Where everything has to be diagnosed, everything's a condition. Everyone wears their conditions on their sleeve and expects everybody to accommodate their distinct disadvantages and peculiarities. It's almost there's got to be some balance there. But back in that day, things were stifled, things were stuffed down, things were repressed. Healing, any kind of therapy, like what a waste of time that is, right? But
Yeah,
no,
I don't even think there was a therapist in my little town.
there's a balance. There's a balance there.
Yeah. Plus, you think of the assassination of Kennedy, of his brother, of Martin Luther King. If you're an impressionable kid, and also back then, I understand now, my
Oh,
grandson actually,
duck and roll, right? Hide under your desk during the nuclear drills, all that stuff.
yeah. So no wonder I wasn't just, finding a unicorn to jump over a rainbow. Like, I mean, not everybody was affected that way. I just had a personality. And also, I was the oldest in my family, so I was a responsible one.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was just really interesting. I really struggled with this idea of love and especially divine love. I didn't language it at the time. But yeah, that was just, I can look back now and see this thread of doubt and wonder and wait a minute, does everybody else get something and I just don't get it? Like how does that work? How does that work? And I grew up in a beautiful little Presbyterian church with loving, kind community. I mean, beautiful, beautiful people. And it just something didn't click for me. Just something didn't click for me.
Yeah. Well, we're gonna get into that here in the next segment. But what we're gonna do is go to the first commercial break, which is actually a video about your program. But to sort of tee that up, let's fast forward. We'll come back and discover, the duration and the length of the journey. But let's just briefly introduce the idea of the Be Love principles. We'll get into it much later, but what is that all about in a nutshell? And we'll come back and unpack it.
It is a template that helps you understand how to live from a constricted, ego-based perspective to a more divine, loving one. How's
Awesome.
that for a nutshell?
No, I love it. And so what we're going to do now is play a little video. Everyone get your pens out to jot down. There's not a QR code, or maybe there is. I'll see if we have one here in the studio. Doesn't look like we have a QR code for this one. So everyone get down, ready to write your or in fact, before we even go, let me put it in the chat. What is the URL that people might want to go to for this? Is there one?
Yep, to find everything. And I think that's probably going to be in the show notes, but you can go to More From Diane, and that's Diane with one N. Morefromdiane.com.
Okay. So I'll put that in the chat right now. Don't go there right now. Watch the video and stay with us here in the show, but jot this down for later. We'll be right back.
I want to know what it's like to be the one in the family with the weird ideas, the one that's curious about different spiritual and metaphysical topics and ideas. That's why I created the Empowered Spiritual Path monthly membership. My name is Diane Haworth. I'm an experienced spiritual coach, the founder of the Be Love Principles, and now it's my honor to host curious people just like you in a membership where every month we explore a new topic. Recent topics have been how to embrace the mystic that lives within you, spiritual activism, tools for clarity, confidence, and connection. We gather together as a group for a central workshop every month on Zoom. And then we also have a second session where we learn tools and meditations to implement these beautiful practices that we're learning about. In addition, we have a community where we support each other. I'd love to have you on the path.
I love the way you do that introduction and invite everyone to join that path. So in the chat there, more from Diane.com. So let's talk then a little bit about those, where you went from those initial feelings of childhood where something was missing that didn't actually kind of get answered till decades later. So what was it like then coming of age and your journey up until the Be Love Principles?
Well, as I said, I'm the oldest of three kids in my core family, and I was the kid that wanted to do everything right. So I went to church and I read books. Now, remember, we didn't have big bookstores. We had a little library, and we didn't have the access to information that we do now. There wasn't even this thing called the internet back then, right? So I paid attention to my parents and my parents' friends, and I tried to hear how other people did things. And I had some beautiful, wonderful friends and their parents that really helped demonstrate to me what love looked like in other scenarios with other families. That was really lovely. And as I grew older and I went to college and then I got out, got married, I tried to do the right things, right? I read books, I took classes, I had the little cassette tapes. I went to church, became a deacon in our church, actually. I did volunteer work. I watched Oprah. I did all the things. And as wonderful as that was, and as enriching as it was to meet people, there was still this piece missing. And for me, it was when my minister at the time decided to start a small group around silent prayer, which was a meditation technique. Now, in my little town,
was this in the Presbyterian church?
It was. I'm telling you, we didn't even have yoga in my little town. This was radical.
Yeah, because that's, I mean, I'm familiar with that with the Quakers, right? And they have beautiful services that incorporate that, and it's very powerful. I've been to a few of them, but I didn't know. And I got to interrupt you here because normally I don't do this, but this question came in, it piqued my interest too. From Chloe, if I could ask, I'll go ahead and show it here. And beforehand, I said don't get distracted by the chat, and here I am distracted by the chat. But could you ask Diane what passing the peace off means? I think it's unique to Presbyterians. Are you familiar with that?
I know that we would pass the peace. I don't know about pass the peace off. That kind of sounds funny, actually. And as I remember it, I've not been in the church for many years. It was just where we greeted each other, right? You just pass the peace that way. But that's a great question, because that's exactly what I try to do now through my work, is help people connect to the peace within and share it with others. So I appreciate that question.
Wonderful. So now you're doing this silent prayer in church, and tell us about that, because that was a moment.
That was the turning point for everything. I mean, I had, just like everybody here, right? I had all kinds of issues. I had health issues, and throughout my life, financial issues, relationship issues. And whenever I tried to go outside to find answers, and I had wonderful resources, by the way, I would get help to a certain point, but it was this missing piece for me. The meditation, which is what the silent prayer was. He used the word prayer, but really we started a little meditation group on Wednesdays, and we would meet and we went through some books, and we actually would meditate in group for an hour at a time. What I realized it did was all the voices in my head, the one that said, don't do this isn't safe. The voice that said, but wait a minute, maybe we should try something else. Meditation calmed those voices. So what I was able to do for the first time in my life was really hear what I call that voice of the divine within, that calm, peaceful, empowering presence that I just could never hear before, because there was just too much going on. That's what meditation did for me, and it absolutely changed my life.
Wonderful. Yeah, I tend to probably need to be brought into circumstances to allow that to happen. I do constantly ask for and seek guidance, and I do get it. But yeah, I do know people who have that gift more naturally. So you experienced that, and then is that what led to this download, as you call it?
I would say this helped me cultivate a state where I could get that. For me, it wasn't like, oh, I'm going to meditate today and tomorrow I'm floating on a cloud. No, it's been 30 years and I've tried different things. But again, what's really helped me is being able to understand the difference between an ego fearful thought or a loving guidance. Now, what I had a practice of doing before I got the Beloved Principles is in my prayers, in my meditation, I would say, probably for 6 months before that occurred, I would say, show me how to be an instrument of your peace. Show me how to serve. That's what I was listening for. And I also had a journaling practice. And at the top of the page every morning, I would say, love, what do you most want me to know today? To me, love is the intelligent, expansive, creative energy that beats your heart and mind, that creates galaxies. It's God, universe, spirit, whatever you want to call it. To me, it is that essence of creation. And I call that love.
Well, I'm reflecting on a couple of things from my own experience here. We talked about one of them beforehand, and I'll get to that in a second. But the other one is this little series of books called Conversations with God. I don't know if you're familiar with them.
Absolutely.
And they're a little bit unorthodox. And I remember my sister giving me the first one, and I kind of like, yeah, I'm not going to read this. But one day I sat down and started reading it, and I'm just reminiscing on that. It was very powerful, actually, to read those books because of there was a sincerity that was kind of buried under what came across almost like an arrogance, but wasn't, which is I asked questions of God and I expected answers, right? And I had a conversation, and this person just started writing down these questions. But what I was reflecting on was how you persistently were going with this request. You don't get an answer to a question like that right now. It's like, God, I know that I need patience, so I'm going to ask you for patience, and then you expect to get it quickly. It's just not going to work that way, right? So something as deep and profound as what you're talking about it's not surprising that you had to be dedicated and persistent and begin a practice, not just sort of not, another one of my favorite sayings is, opportunity knocks once, temptation leans on the doorbell, right? So you had to be persistent in asking for this.
That is a wonderful point. And one of the things I wanted to share is it took a lot of discipline. And the root of discipline is disciple. So
Really
if
good
I
point.
thought of myself as a disciple of love, then it wasn't as difficult to sit down every morning. Now, did I want to do it? No. I'm going to be real honest with you. There was plenty of days where it was like, this isn't happening.
Well,
But
you just said something. Now I have to say that second thing because of what you just said. The second thing, which we talked about beforehand, was I was in a spiritual dead end. I think I've shared this with my audience before, where I came to the point where the denomination that I was a part of had split down the middle. Each side began to split further into squabbling fragments, and I had to recognize we were not who we said we were or who we pretended to be. We were not truly fulfilling the will of God the way we had thought. And I began focusing on this one verse and asking God to help show me where the people were that exemplified this. And it was John 13:35. By this shall all men know, and now you'll know why I'm bringing this up right now. By this shall all men know that you are my disciples. I didn't focus on that word before, but that you are my disciples, that you have this discipline. By this thing, people will recognize that you are practitioners of what I teach, because Jesus said, why do you call me Lord, Lord, and don't do the things that I say, right? Everybody calls Jesus Lord, and he says, but you're not following my guidance. You're not actually listening to my words and putting them into practice. But by this thing, all men, an independent outside third-party observer who's not even a Christian, will recognize you as a true disciple if you have love one for another. And we were a bunch of squabbling, bickering, fragmented people. Now, we had prided ourselves on not condemning other people to hell like other churches, but we still had an arrogant view of who we were and who they were. But we recognize it's not our job to judge them. God is the judge, right? We would never judge them and determine whether they are or are not really, whatever. But I went on a 10-year journey to find answers to that, only eventually to come around and find them in my backyard and realize what it meant to try to practice it, right? So tell me about how your epiphany now and how you came to this download.
Well, I was at a conference actually with my mentor, and his name is Robert Holden, and I've taken lots of classes from him, and actually am now a student of A Course in Miracles. That is that's something that really speaks to me. And he's the one that actually shared that writing prompt with me. Well, I was in this big conference room, and we were told as an exercise to imagine we were seated on a foundation of love and ask, love, what do you most want me to know today? Now, I will say, I was a little smug about it because I thought, well, I've been doing this for years. I know how this is going to go. And usually in my practice, I'll get a phrase. I will get, maybe a paragraph, because it's really, what do you want me to know today? And in this particular time, and I believe it was amplified by all the people in there focused on love, by the way, I heard be love. And then there was it was like a movie started playing in my head, and I was observing this. And I actually received in this process 4 steps that later I started calling the Be Love principles. If anybody wants to know the full story, because it's pretty involved, but it's a great story. It's on YouTube. You can find it on morefromdiane.com. But what came through were these principles. Greet everyone with an open heart without an agenda. It's number 1. Number 2, see the divine essence in everyone and everything. 3 is forgive quickly, completely, and unconditionally. And the 4th was remember you never left the light of the all. You are the light. Now, this happened. I mean, it was a vision. I heard it. I felt it. This is not what happens. And to tell you the truth, when that little part was over, I thought somebody had spiked my coffee. I mean, I really did. I was
Hey,
like,
it happened to the Beatles. They were visiting a dentist, right? And the first time the Beatles dropped acid, it was done to them, right? I don't know if people know that little detail, but sorry, I digress. I'm into music
well,
history.
I didn't see any Beatles there. I had a cup on my coffee, but I mean, that's how jarring it was.
Yeah.
And if you go and listen to the story, actually, I got horribly sick for like 10 days, 7 or 10 days, which I now know, right? In retrospect, one of the things that happened was I lost my voice. So I couldn't say this to anyone. So it had to be processed inside.
It had to be internalized before you could share it.
And it was a shock to my physical system. I mean, this was a burst of energy, and it just knocked me out a little bit. I mean, I went to my conference and did all that sort of thing, but it started this path. It just was, this is not what I expected. When I said, quite frankly, when I said, show me how to serve, I thought, oh, maybe I'll go to the pound, pet some puppies, hug some kittens. That'd be cool. I did not understand that this is what I would receive. And I also understand I received it because I needed it the most. I needed a way.
Those 4 principles are easy to say, but each one is so profound, so powerful, so filled with depth. I've frankly have come to those in a different way, in a different path, not in that succinct, compact form, but each of those principles have become clear to me over time in different ways. And what was that 4th one again? You never left the light. You never left
You never left the light. You are the light. You never left the light of the
right.
all.
So, one of the things that I've shared many times is going back to the book of Genesis. And I came to this, I've written a whole book, The Hardness of the Heart, digging into Jesus has 7 statements in which he says, I think there's 7, maybe there are 6 out of 5, but from the beginning, it was not so. And one of the times he did that was about the issue of divorce. Moses said we could get divorced for all these different reasons. What do you say? And he says, well, Moses allowed it because of the hardness of your heart, but from the beginning it was not so. So I studied all those statements from the beginning it was not so to get back to that origin, right? And it took me back to the book of Genesis. It took me back to study the idea of rulership, right? Are we sovereign? Or did God intend somebody else to rule over us in some way at some point in time, whether it was a church organization or government? We were created in the image of God, and there's a degree of sovereignty there. And the first time the word rule is used, God put the greater and lesser light in heaven to rule the day and the night. And it to summarize a lot of thought and study and analysis and reflection, it comes down to this. We submit to the light. We follow the light. When we stray from the light, we trend into darkness. That's when we become enslaved by something else. That's when we begin to believe that we've lost the light. But the light is always there, and no matter how dark, and that's the point of the lesser light, even in the darkest night, look at a full moon sometime. You can go walk around in the dark. We have a property on the top of a hill. It's dark with woods. I can go walk around by the light of the full moon. Even in the darkest night, you've got stars, even in the moon. So God is always shedding some light. You can always turn to the light. You always have that choice. It's always there. And when we submit to that, we retain our sovereignty. We don't become enslaved by wrong ideas, by our passions, by materialism, by all the things where we would stray.
I think that's a wonderful point. As this has evolved over the years, and as I've worked with each individual principle and then used them together as a process, when I was working with that last one about the light, what occurred to me and what I came to understand was light is also a metaphor for knowledge, for truth.
Yes.
Right? So understanding that you are the light from the experience I had gave me such it just was so empowering, because it was like, okay, no matter what is going on out here, the truth is inside of me. I have access to it. And I tell my clients all the time, if you think that you can Google stuff in here, and I don't know how this thing works, it's not that big of a shift to recognize that this, you can Google God, is what I tell them, right? By accessing this divine love inside. It is you, it is me, it is everybody that's ever been or ever will be. We are all facets of divine light.
One of your other principles, the divine essence in everyone, right? Namaste, the spirit in me, the light in me salutes the light in you. And approaching, I mean, your principles are beautiful. So we're gonna unpack them more one by one. I think this is a good moment to go to our second commercial break. One of our sponsors has produced something called Ocean 2.0, which presents the world's holy writings, the religious literature from all the different lamps. No matter what lamp, the light is the same, right? It doesn't matter the shape of the lamp or the wick or which kind of oil. The light that comes from that wick is all the same. So this is an effort to enable people to search those holy writings, compare them, contrast them, search for that light, search for that truth. So we'll play this commercial. We'll come right back and dig more into those principles with Diane Haworth and the Be Love principles. Don't go anywhere.
Discover the world's religious traditions like never before with Ocean 2.0 Reader. Our custom ebook reader is designed for exploration and study with an immersive audio integrated reading experience and powerful research tools available on all platforms including web, Windows, macOS, Linux, Android, and iOS. Experience the benefits of immersive reading by combining ear and eye with improved comprehension and vocabulary acquisition. Our interfaith library features books from various religions, so you can have access to a wealth of knowledge. Try Ocean 2.0 Reader today and elevate.
Welcome back to Diane Haworth and the Be Love principles. Right before the break, we learned what they are, and we've also seen an ad with the URL. What is it again?
Morefromdiane.com, and that gives you a list of everything that I do, including the link directly to the principles.
More from Diane.com. It's easy, but yeah, morefromdiane.com. So you can go there to sign up and become a member of the community. But for the audience, then unpack those 4 principles. Tell us a little bit more about once you regained your voice, how you internalized them, how you got launched on this journey of spreading that word.
Well, I want to just emphasize at first is it was a process. I mean, it was a process, and I had to sit with it, and I sat with my journal. That's a good way for me to get guidance and I felt it was just beneficial for me to do that. So one of the things that I was guided to do was actually to sit with each of those principles for a week at a time. So for an entire week, I started figuring out, okay, well, how could I greet this person with an open heart without an agenda? And what does that even mean? And that evolved to understanding I had to greet myself first. So that led to lots of mirror work. And that was hard. That was really hard. So I worked through that. Then I started going to that second principle, see the divine essence in everyone and everything. And I want to be very honest, I didn't want to do that. There was a lot of times when I thought, well, I can see it in this person, but I can't see it over there.
Well,
and
we already have
a situation.
We already have a question, so we'll bring this in. We'll come back to more of these later. But peace on earth, how can you genuinely love something that is not lovable or ugly? How can you see divine essence in people who don't manifest any virtues?
I really appreciate that question, peace on earth, and it's a good one. And it's one I asked myself, and one I would take to my meditation and my journal, because I didn't get it at first either. And I can just share with you how that evolved for me. What I came to understand was that, and that's also when I went through that third one, which has to do with forgiveness, was that when I saw through my eyes of ego, all I could see was my judgments and my fears and my traumas and whatever my experience had been with this other person or situation or whatever it was. When I could shift, and it took a while, to see through the eyes of love, then I saw the essence of a person or a situation without my fears. In the Course in Miracles, we say that everything is love or a call for love. And where I did see people that I thought were rude, menacing, right? All of that sort of things. As I used this process, I began to see people who were fearful, people who were dealing with their own traumas. Now, if there needed to be healthy boundaries in place, absolutely we have to do that. But when we get to that third principle, which is not my favorite or my client's favorite, right? Forgive quickly, completely, and unconditionally. What I found was if I took a person or a situation and I used the principles as a process, and I asked to see them with an open heart without an agenda, and then I asked to see their divine essence, then by the time I got to the forgiveness part, think something had softened and something had shifted. When I work with this process with my clients, I will always say to them, you don't have to forgive anybody. You can, if you're ready, you can ask, what would it feel like if I was ready to forgive, for example? So if I work someone through that process and we're using what I call a focus person, like somebody that they're having an issue with, and it could be a memory, it could be an event, it could be anything, and we go through each of those, then in that last section where we talk about the light, I actually have them envision being in the light, and if they're willing, to bring the person into the light with them. And I can tell you that I've done this on stage, I've done this on video, I've done it in countless classes. There has been such profound shifts in people. It's really been amazing. As a matter of fact, late 2019, which I had just got the principles in 2018, so I was still learning about them, I was guided to do a case study. You know what the first thing I said to my little guides in love? Wait, I said, I'm not doing a case study. I'm not in school anymore. I'm not doing that. But it kept coming. Do a case study. I was told exactly how to do it. So at the end of 2019, I gathered a small group together. I had it was like a list of 8 different traits that I would have them, and all this was guided, by the way, that I would have them rate on a scale from 1 to 10, self-love, confidence, clarity, all of that. And then for 3 months, we worked with the principles. Now, that was January 2020 is when this kicked off. I had no idea what was going on. Nobody did. And this case study went through March. So you guys remember what was going on in 2020. And what was incredible is when I went back, because these people did a survey for me every week, their sense of clarity, connection, their feelings of peace, even in that crazy time, increased by it was nuts. I think as a group, their sense of peace increased by 17%. Now, who was feeling peaceful? First quarter of 2020. The one that really got me was their sense of clarity about who they are and what they were here to do as a group increased by 60%. That's the power of the principles. You mentioned conversations with God. One of the things that just blows me away, even after all these years, is this is not the way I talk. Y'all have heard me now for almost an hour. I don't say, see the divine essence in everyone. That's not how I talk. So I realize that just like everybody here, We are all conduits for these beautiful, loving messages, and we're all here to share this with everybody. We get what we need, and I certainly needed it. And it is my privilege and honor to teach this. But every day, I find things that I can rely on the principles to help me move through. Oh, and I do want to mention one thing. After I've been working with these for years, immediately, right, I would always go to, I'm having a problem with this, or I'm having a whatever it is, a challenge, and I would use the principles and it would be wonderful. But what I realized was anytime we are putting our human perspective on anything, the love we have for our kids, a wonderful event, we're limiting our vision. Even using this with something that we already think is wonderful expands past what our ego constricted, what we can see from an ego perspective or a personality perspective. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I just mean to me, we're here to be fully human and fully divine, best we can, moment by moment. And it's tricky. It's tricky sometimes, Wade.
Well, I'm reflecting on something I saw shortly before the show. You mentioned 2020 and
yep.
The trauma. We've been through a lot of trauma, and whatever one's particular persuasion, belief, religiously, politically, ideologically, our circumstances, everybody knows that we're talking about America in particular, but the world, but America in particular, the nation sometimes feels more divided than perhaps at any time in history since the Civil War, right? And the other day we had an inauguration. I missed most of it, was busy working. Somebody sent me this link today about Carrie Underwood performing this song at the inauguration, America the Beautiful. I don't know if you saw it or if others have seen it, but in this link, I guess there was a technical glitch, right? There was supposed to be some musical accompaniment. So she's standing up there, and you've got the incoming president on one side, you've got the outgoing president on the other side, and the outgoing vice president standing right there behind him. And the outgoing president is like looking down at his notes, like not looking up at all. Not, you could just tell from his body language, everything, doesn't want to be there, doesn't want to be there, and representing clearly to everybody else that doesn't want to be there, right? That doesn't agree with this, whatever. There have been some really negative things said on all sides.
Yeah.
So now there's this technical glitch, and Carrie's standing there smiling with the microphone, and everything goes silent right before she's supposed to sing. And everybody's waiting, and people have different impressions. And eventually the outgoing president kind of looks up, and the incoming president is standing presidential, kind of like not reacting to anything. And this goes on for an interminable amount of time while they're waiting. And then suddenly Carrie says, well, I can just sing it. And she says, y'all help me now, sing along. And she begins singing a cappella, and it's just this beautiful voice. And it brought tears to my eyes because you saw certain individuals, without mentioning names, reluctantly get sort of drawn into being forced. They're right there on the camera. It's like on their face right behind Carrie Underwood, having to sort of sing along to these lyrics. Oh, beautiful for spacious skies, for amber waves of grain, right? And sort of reluctantly mumbling and mouthing the words. But by the end of the song, everyone in that space had been transformed. Everyone had been united by the act of singing along to this, because everyone, at least in that room, had to represent, whether they believe it or not, that this is a great country and they're proud to be a part of it, right? In that moment, no matter what, right? No matter who, no matter what. And everything was transformed within a couple of minutes just based on this simple little experience. And it really brought tears to my eyes of the hope of unity and oneness and, getting over all this and realizing that, it doesn't take much to just roll up your sleeves and try to make the world a better place in whatever way you can. What would love expect of me today? What was the question you asked?
I always say, love, what do you most want me to know today?
Yeah.
And I think I didn't see that, but I'm not surprised, because to me, music is a love language. And regardless of what your beliefs are on anything, to me, everybody wants the same thing. You want to be loved, and you want people, places, passions that you can love, right? It really, it's just like that. And people are so polarized because they have different ideas of how we can do that. But if we can go back to the basics, if we can just recognize the way I believe it, we are all one. We are all from that light. How can we use love as a way that guides us to create this world that I want to leave my grandkids? A world that's more collaborative, respectful, compassionate, and fun. Love is fun, y'all. That's people think, oh, you got to be all. No, love is fun. It's vivacious. It's just think of laughter, think of joy. That's the essence of love. That's the essence of love. I don't sit around laughing all day, by the way, because the human part comes in. And no matter what is going on in my life or in the lives of people that I love, I know there is a foundation of love that supports me, that supports them. And when I can literally, for me, I did it right before we came on camera, actually. I breathe into my heart space and I said, show me how to serve tonight. Tell me what to say. How do we share love with this beautiful audience that's with us? Because that's what we're here to do, is because this is fun. I mean, I know you have a good time because we were having a good time before we even went on camera.
Yep. So I think this is a great time to go to the next commercial break. One of our sponsors, the Royal Falcon Foundation, has programs for 11 to 15-year-olds. It's called Experiential Leadership. And increasingly, we're going into these companion gardening and regenerative farming principles in getting them their hands in the earth and realizing not only are we love, according to the Genesis story, we were created from the dust of the earth. So we are soil, right? And this is humble, right? The dirt is humble, right? And yet filled with life, and we are filled with life. So all of these principles are being woven together. We'll showcase this quick video, and when we come back, we're going to start engaging a little bit more with the audience. Lots of interesting comments there. Thank you so much for being with us, Diane. Don't go anywhere. We got more to come.
Welcome to the Royal Falcon Foundation. Our curriculum and activities inspire and train adolescents through hands-on experiences, fostering growth and empowerment. Through immersive and challenging experiences, we shape young minds to think independently and develop their leadership skills. Our programs foster new friendships and unity, shaping young leaders to tackle real-world challenges with confidence. We believe in equipping the next generation with the skills to become leaders of tomorrow. Join us at the Royal Falcon Foundation and be part of a journey that empowers, unites, and inspires. Double your impact with our matching grant. Until the end of 2025, every tax-deductible donation to the Royal Falcon Foundation, up to $1,000, will be matched dollar for dollar. Visit our website to donate now or email info@royalfalconfoundation.org for more details. Together, we can make a greater difference.
Welcome back to Creating the Image of God. I'm here with Diane Haworth, who is the, what should I call you? The founder of, or the sponsor of, or the center of?
I think of it as the founder of the Be Love principles, but they really found me. Actually, it's the way that it worked.
I love that play on words. That's awesome. So, and once again, somethingmorediane.com.
Okay, I should have gotten that one. More from Diane.
More from Diane.com. I'm putting it in the chat again because I want people to go there and join your community, which is a great segue now to get into a couple of the comments. We had quite a few comments from early on. Don't have time to go through them all, but there was one here that I want to go to. Let me find it here. It had to do with what people can expect when they. Here we go.
Okay.
From Elizabeth Collier. Can you give me some examples of what a newcomer to your community would expect?
Okay. So thank you for that, Elizabeth. And one of the things that we love to do in our community, it's very much similar to this, and that is just be welcomed and your curiosity is honored, right? I really believe that love meets us where we are. And what I love about some of the topics that we discuss, even like the Be Love principles, right? I've been working with these things for years. So I have a different take than someone that's just coming in for the first time that you've ever heard this. But in the community, you are respected, you are supported, and together we explore spiritual topics related to love. Does that answer your question?
I hope so. We'll see if Elizabeth. Somebody else had came in. God thought of it first. Yeah, that's an excellent question. I'm curious as well. There was another question similar to that about the nature of your community.
Y'all have some great handles, by the way. God thought these are some great things. I wish I thought of some of them.
Well, we also, so some of our community here, we've got a community that sort of generated from Planksip up in Canada, which is a more of a philosophical site. So we have a lot of people who ask introspective questions there. We also have a Baha'i community that streams this down in Clearwater, Florida. So we have a few of them on here. So we have these like pockets of different different viewers that have found us and are part of this community that we're. Now, let me spend a moment on the building vibrant communities idea here.
Yeah.
Because that's relatively new, and it gets back to this question that we showed. How can you genuinely love someone that's not lovable? That one. And we had a follow up to that, which is this one here. Maybe if we knew these people more, we would be less judgmental and more understanding and compassionate. So I want to just share an experience that we had. My wife and I, and a few others in our local community, go to an assisted living facility, a nursing home, every Sunday. We've been doing this for about 18 months or so. It started by the invitation of somebody who had asked a physical therapist who was there to talk more about the Bible, and somehow I got asked as a former minister, but one who's open. And then we just formed a relationship, and she was praying that she could find a community, and lo and behold, the community grew up around her and her intention and her spirit. And so we go there every week, and there are quite a few people involved. We are on the activity calendar. It's almost like we're now the chaplain service. Whatever religion, we bring in principles from the Baha'i faith and other religions about the soul. That's how we started, in prayer and the Word of God. Anyway, we then got invited to go to some of the rooms and meet some of the other people who hadn't come to some of those who were bedbound. And we met this one woman, Loretta, who was a double amputee of both legs, right above the knee, an African-American woman. And she was in bed. And I have to admit, and there's maybe some other, cosmetic issues that were going on here, related to hair and this and that. And I was taken aback. And I was, I had an awkward moment about how to interact with this person and what to say and how to react to her. And she's got a little bit of a salty personality. And maybe there are also some medications that are involved, that kind of affect how somebody comes across and whatever. But this woman, Loretta, is now one of the most faithful people that comes to our meeting every Sunday. And the thing that strikes me about her is how positive she is. Every week, she says a number of things that are just insanely positive. And you have never, ever once heard her complain about her situation and her circumstances. She is grateful for the path that she is on and that God has given her, right? And she's such a tremendous inspiration, right? And that's why, this comment, maybe if we knew these people more, we would be less judgmental and more understanding and compassionate. And when we do try to practice that principle that you said about always being open and seeing the divine, can you reiterate the 4 principles to us again? Because you do that so beautifully. They're so succinct.
Absolutely. And they're, and we've got them all written down for you, so you'll have access to all that. It was greet everyone with an open heart without an agenda. And that's what you did to that beautiful woman. That's what you did. You brought love into the room. And if everybody wants to be loved and have something to love, that was the opportunity that she needed. That's the opportunity she needed. So that's that first one. Greet everyone, including yourself, with an open heart without an agenda. 2 is see the divine essence in everyone and everything. And actually, when you go to my website, the Beloved Principles, I actually have a little video on each of these to give you some ideas on how to implement them. 3 is the big one. Forgive quickly, completely, and unconditionally. And we've got lots of resources to help you with that. And the 4th one is just remember you are the light. You never left the light of the all. So when you went into that beautiful woman's room, if you could be light meeting light instead of personality meeting personality, that's the way I look at it. That's what has helped me. That's how it's evolved for me. But I have to tell you, the more people that use the principles, and I hope you'll take them to the nursing home, actually.
I was just sitting here thinking, I got to go to the website, copy them down, write them down. This will be a discussion point. One of our Sundays is these 4 principles. Trust me.
Yeah, I even have coloring sheets, free meditations. But my clients, my students teach me all the time.
Yeah.
Guess what? This is what happened, and this is how I use the principles. And I'm like, whoa, okay. Because it evolves in your own life.
Well, and that's the other thing about going there week after week. It didn't take long before we could honestly and genuinely say, this is the absolute highlight of our week. And we get so much because of the collective wisdom and experience. And, some of these people are transitioning. In the year and a half we've been there have been several people who have passed on. We can literally feel the presence after that happens. I mean, one person in particular, Michael, he passed away unexpectedly. He was actually not at the nursing home. He'd come there. He was on dialysis, and he had some issue, but he passed away kind of unexpectedly. And immediately within the next few weeks, there was a surge in attendance. And one of them was a woman that we met at a service for Michael. And we could just feel how there was a new kind of power and energy coming from the other side, from Michael. And everyone there recognized it and acknowledged it. And so this building of a vibrant community in a nursing home, And what we're also doing is building vibrant communities of interested parties up in Canada and down in Florida on a given topic with a given presenter. So there are many different ways to build community, but every soul with whom we come into contact, we have the opportunity of creating this reciprocal energy that you're talking about here through these principles, the light, the embracing of open and with no agenda. And it's just so simple and so beautiful.
It's profound, and it is life-changing, and it is, and it for me, it's taken practice. What I used to work actually in a nursing home, and my dad lived out the rest of his life in one, and I can tell you that there was lots of laughs and jokes and funny things that happened. And when people passed, as we all have that that happens, right? It is so profound when you can feel the love, because to me, that's what that energy is. It is the love that is present. It's right there. The way I explained this to my grandson when his great grandfather passed, I showed him an ice cube. And I said, this is what your Papal was, right? He was solid. We could hug him. And then we watched it melt. And I said, this is when he got sick. And then we actually boiled it, and the vapor went into the air. And I said, it's still here, but you can't see or feel him the way you did. That's the way I explain it. Love doesn't die. It changes form, but it doesn't die.
Well, and that's a perfect time from Henry Montgomery. What part of Genesis that talks about returning to the dirt or soil? Well, that's I think it's from dust you were, and to dust you shall return, right? The circle of life. But the soil is rich and vibrant. So in regenerative farming, we learn that you don't till the soil, you don't break up the soil, right? Because there's a web of roots that are communicating with each other in the soil, and every cubic foot of soil has millions of living microorganisms in it, and you don't just sort of bust that up and then spray stuff on it, right? And we again, I could go on and on. We're working on a presentation now about the seed, the soil, and the soul, right? And how this circle of life, just like the beautiful analogy that you used of the ice cube, right? Being reunited with God, and as we mentioned in this nursing home, working with these people, what they're teaching us and what we're teaching them, it's just so beautiful, preparing them. That forgiveness thing you mentioned, right, is so important. Each week we ask for prayers, and so many of them have to do with those residual relationships, right? The children, or even parents that have passed, where now these people are at that age themselves, and they realize what it was like and what they did to people who were that age without realizing what they were doing, right?
Yeah, I love what you're talking about. And I'm glad we got this question about the dirt and the soil. You can see the angel oak behind me, which is a real tree in the South. And I come from tree people. So the soil, the trees, nature, it's very interwoven in love. To me, you see the way, if you live in a place where I do here on the East Coast, where we go through 4 seasons, you see this regenerative process, right? All the time. And when I look at dirt or a patch of the forest, I see so many possibilities, seen and unseen. That's what you were referring to. And I just wonder, what's love going to plant here? What bird is going to drop some seed? What flower is going to be here? That's part of, for me, looking for love in nature. Love, show me what you want me to see today. What do you want me to know today? And it is a joyous process, and a human one that has ups and downs like everything else.
Awesome. Well, we want to have more from Diane.com, and hopefully, Diane, you will find the time to come back and visit us again.
I'd love to.
We're out of time now. I've got one more task to do, which is play the sneak peek of next week's show. But before I do, what do you want to leave our audience with, or were there any chat messages? I only got to cover a handful. There are a bunch more out there in the discussion. Anything that you want to share, or final words to the audience before we go to that sneak peek?
Well, I certainly want to thank them and thank you for letting me share my passion, which is the Be Love principles. And if I can share the thing that I have learned about love, is that love will show me what I need to know. Love will show me, will guide me. Love is intelligent, it's expansive, it's creative. And if I don't know what to do, I just say, love, what do you most want me to know today? And I'd say that's a lovely way for anyone to start.
There's a beautiful quote from Abdul Baha, one of the founders of the Baha'i faith, where it's, and I'll probably mangle it, but it goes something like this: where there is love, nothing is too much trouble, and there is always time.
Oh, that's gorgeous. Yeah, and it's the truth. That is the light of truth right there.
Unfortunately, though, we are out of time, but But Diane, it's just so awesome to have you. It's really been inspiring. It's warmed my heart, filled me with inspiration and love. Thank you for being here. Namaste.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank all of you. Um, yeah. And I look forward to seeing you on the path.
So before we, if you can stick around, I know it's getting really late where you are. You and I can connect after this. But I'll sign off now with everybody here, and just stay tuned to watch this sneak peek of next week, and we'll see you here same time, same place, 8 p.m. for Created in the Image of God, building vibrant communities. Hello, everyone. It's Wade France, and I'm in the studio early this morning with Catherine Cook, who hails from Texas, who is the author of a work of historical fiction based on or inspired by true events, including her relative, a great granduncle who lived in Germany under Nazi occupation. It's an amazing book. Going to hold up a picture of it. The Sower of Black Field. Welcome to the studio, Catherine.
Thank you, Wade. It's wonderful to be here.
Well, on your book, I noticed right away, immediately, 2 awards. Congratulations. And then it's published just last year. So you are an academic who has done peer research, who knows how to research and get to the facts, yet you chose to write this book as a work of historical fiction. Why?
So yeah, what I felt was that what happens in academia kind of tends to stay in academia. And I kind of felt like the best way to get a really broad audience and to tell the story was to use the history as the bare bones, of the story, and kind of like add in all of the literary elements. So what that would do is reach people who kind of tend to hate lecture halls and footnotes, but they really love the feeling of walking in the shoes of a character. And I felt like that was the best way to tell this story, because we have a very rare case of an American defending Germans against Americans. And you ask, well, why did he do that? And I kind of felt like you need to have the emotional story to understand the context.
Right, because these characters are therefore nuanced in terms of our classic hero-villain model that we understand. And there are so many reasons why I wanted you on the show after I learned about your book, including the fact that we Something or Other Publishing has also published this work of original historical research, Genocide Revealed, on war crimes committed in Serbia under the authority of the regent, Admiral Horthy, who is a war hero in Hungary. Same kind of convoluted situation and a unique story. We have many stories like this that are coming to light today, in which and this is another reason why the whole historical fiction aspect you and I talked about briefly. I lived in Germany for 10 years, and during the 80s and early 90s, when a lot of people were still alive that had experienced World War II, never met a German who admitted that they knew what was going on. I don't mean that negatively. It's just a fact that nobody wants to put their worst foot forward. And so were you to have tried to make this completely historically accurate, there would have been a lot of information withheld that is needed to tell the story.
I think in this particular case, yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with you on that perspective. What was interesting to me was when I went to Germany and talked with these people, I fully expected, you always hear that nobody wants to talk about this. I had, people in the town of Schwarzenfeld flocking to me and really wanting to tell me their stories. And I felt like they trusted me because I was a relative. They opened up to me because of that. So I kind of felt like I had this inside window into what their thoughts were, what their impressions were, and I felt like it was something that was very rare. So yeah.
Well, I think it's an amazing story, packed in an amazing story, packed in one of the great events. So you got layers of the onion, and that particular group of people, probably really did want their story to be told. And this is a story that needs to be read and heard and understand. So everyone, do not miss Created in the Image of God, Building Vibrant Communities, our episode 138.
5, airing on January 28th with Catherine Cook. I can't wait to see you there.